Let's look at how to use Excel to calculate the mean of a data set. Firstly, let's look at how to calculate the mean of ungrouped data, raw data. So here is the raw data set I've been using, these 25 values here. Now if we want to calculate the mean of those, of course, what we need to do is to add them all up to find the total and then divide by the number of values, which is 25. That, of course, is the mean. Now we could do that manually here by using the sum function to add them all up and then dividing by 25, but there is a built-in function in Excel that will do that in one step, and that function is called average. So let me use that here. So let's calculate the mean, and let's use this function. So equals to start the function, so start typing average. Once it recognizes what you want, of course, as I've said before, if you press the tab key, that completes the function and opens some brackets for you. So now all you have to do is to highlight the range of data. So that's the 25 values. Just check that you've got them all. Yes. Now press enter. And then we have the mean of 26.48. Now let's calculate the mean of this data again, but this time using the frequency distribution. Now it may turn out, in fact, that when you're calculating the mean of some data, you may only have access to a grouping, to a frequency distribution. You may not have the actual raw data. If you have the data values themselves, then of course calculate the average, the mean, using the built-in function. If you only have a frequency distribution, some grouping of the data here, then you can still calculate the mean, but you have to use an approximation method, which involves using the midpoint of the intervals. So let me work out the midpoint here. Let's call this x. And to work out the midpoint here, I'm going to put in a formula. You can see they're fairly easy to see what they are going to be: 5, 15, 25 and so on. In other words, halfway between the lower and upper class boundaries. But I'm going to use a formula. So equals, now I need to put in some brackets here, as you'll see. So in order to work out the midpoint, I need to add together the lower and upper class boundary and divide that sum by 2. The reason for the brackets, of course, is that Excel uses BODMAS. It works out things, it works out calculations by doing division multiplication first before addition, working from left to right. In other words, therefore, if I didn't put the brackets in here, it would divide the C9 by 2 and then add that answer onto B9, which of course is not what I want. I want it to add these two together first and then divide that sum by 2. So I need brackets here. Remember that brackets always override the normal order of precedence of operators. So entering that gives me, of course, 5. If I now copy the formula down, I will get the rest. Okay. Now the next stage is to multiply each midpoint by the corresponding frequency. So it's f times x, fx. Again, formula equals, so the frequency here multiplied by the midpoint, which of course in this case is 20, 4 times 5, and then let's do the rest. Okay. Now the mean, the formula for the mean for group data is sigma fx over sigma f. In other words, the sum of the fx values divided by the sum of the frequencies. So I've already got the sum of the frequencies I did in a previous video, 25 of course, which is the total number of observations in my data set. I now want the sum of the fx values, so let's use the sum function. Again, I'll use the auto sum button to quickly put it in. Has it guessed the correct range? It has. So enter that, and we have 655. Now we can easily calculate the mean, and that's simply equal to the sum of the fx values divided by the sum of the frequencies. and we get 26.2. So as you can see, in this case, and this is very often the case, the approximation method, the method based on the grouping of the data rather than the actual data, gives you a answer very, very close to the correct answer, the answer that's based on the actual data itself. So even if you don't have access to the raw data, you only have a frequency distribution, there's a very good chance that when you calculate the mean of the data using this method, you'll get a very good, accurate answer.